The sea was his only companion, speaking in murmurs of waves that never asked who he was or what he had lost. He sat at the pier's edge, feeling the air shimmer around him like a song waiting to begin. Then, a voice, gentle yet alive, cut through the hush, carrying the warmth of someone who had not learned to fear silence. She asked if he was waiting for someone. He wasn't, but he wished he were. Her laughter brushed against him like sunlight through closed eyelids, painting a world his eyes could not see. They walked together, step by step, her words sketching colors in his mind. Blue of the horizon, gold of the tide, silver where light kissed water. By the time she said goodbye, the world felt larger, as if her voice had opened a door inside the dark. The cafe by the shore was a refuge of murmurs, clinking cups, soft jazz, and the hum of morning talk. They met there again, not by plan, but by rhythm, as though the tide itself carried them back. She described the colors of the sunrise as he listened, tracing circles on the rim of his cup. Between words, silence filled the air like a shared secret. When she spoke, he could imagine her smile. When she paused, he could feel her watching him. He told her once that her voice made the world feel less lonely. She said maybe loneliness was just the soul waiting to be heard. Neither spoke after that, but the quiet between them was no longer empty. The rain came suddenly, washing the streets clean of sound except for the soft patter against glass. They found shelter beneath an old awning. Laughter, tangled with thunder. She described the world as it blurred. Street lights melting into rivers of gold. He reached out, fingers brushing the air where her voice had been. She took his hand, guiding it to the rain, letting the drops fall between their fingers. The moment was brief, but endless. The city vanished, leaving only the rhythm of two hearts and the memory of water falling like music. He woke to her humming, soft, uncertain like the edge of a dream. Morning light filtered through the curtains, turning her song into gold. They sat together in the quiet room, the scent of coffee and salt air drifting in. She told him the world was waking. He said it always had been. He just hadn't known how to listen. Her laughter folded around his words like a promise. When her hand found his, he didn't flinch. The warmth of her skin was the first color he ever truly felt. He sat in the sterile brightness of the clinic, the scent of antiseptic and possibility thick in the air. The doctor spoke of miracles, of sight returned, of light restored. She stood beside him, silent but trembling. He reached for her hand and she let him find it. The doctor's words blurred into distant sound. All he could feel was the tremor of her pulse beneath his fingers. Hope can be cruel when it comes dressed as salvation. When the doctor said it could be done, he nodded. But her silence lingered longer than the promise itself. The world burst open in silence. He didn't breathe at first, afraid that even air might shatter the fragile miracle before him. Light pressed against his eyelids like 1,000 unknown memories trying to enter all at once. When he finally dared to open his eyes, everything was too much. Too bright, too sharp, too real. Shapes bled into color, color into confusion. The doctor's voice felt far away, and her hand in his was only a trembling shadow at the edge of his new horizon. He tried to look at her, truly look. But sight was crueler than blindness. The woman he once knew by heart now stood before him like a stranger painted in light. Morganishishki, now finer ride. He found a mirror and didn't recognize the face staring back. The man within it blinked uncertainly, like a ghost testing its reflection. He had imagined this moment so often, the reunion between soul and sight. Yet all he saw was an intruder shaped from light and memory. Every line, every shadow felt foreign. She stood behind him, her voice soft as breath, telling him he looked exactly as she imagined. But he could not see himself through her words anymore. The mirror became a wall, and her reflection, a faint blur fading into glass. She smiled as if nothing had changed, But he saw her now, the way the world did. Her freckles, the way her eyes glimmered when she spoke, the faint line of exhaustion beneath them. He searched for the voice he loved within the image before him, yet it eluded him. Sight had made him greedy, impatient, distracted by detail. Her voice became background noise against the spectacle of the visible. When she reached for him, he hesitated, not out of rejection but confusion. For the first time, he realized how much easier love had been when he couldn't see her face. Days stretched longer now, filled with faces and colors that blurred together. The world demanded his attention. The architecture, the sky, the way sunlight fractured through glass. She still came, sitting beside him as he learned to see, but her voice no longer anchored him. He began to chase the world he had missed, wandering farther each day, convincing himself that wonder required solitude. Yet each sunset brought a hollow quiet, the kind that even beauty couldn't fill. He could see everything now except what mattered most. The morning she didn't come. The silence returned, heavier than before. He waited at the cafe, eyes tracing every stranger's face, searching for something familiar and failing. The sea beyond the window looked different now, flat and indifferent beneath the noonlight. He realized then that sight had not given him clarity, only distance. Her laughter, her scent, the rhythm of her presence, gone. The world was wide open, but he had never felt so small. The miracle that had promised him everything had taken the only thing that truly saw him. He returned to the cafe as if the air might still remember her. The sound of cups clinking, chairs scraping, and conversations felt hollow now, stripped of meaning. He sat at their old table, tracing the faint coffee ring left behind from the last morning they shared. Every sound reminded him of her. The rustle of fabric, the sigh of wind slipping through the half-open door. He looked toward the sea beyond the window, trying to imagine her voice describing it, the way she once painted waves with words he could feel. But the world he had gained now felt colored. Light had shown him faces, buildings, horizons, yet it had erased the one person who made darkness worth surviving. He found the recorder by accident, tucked inside a drawer she used to keep near the piano. When he pressed play, the room filled with her voice, clear, unguarded, alive. She spoke to him as if he were listening, describing her dreams, the things she never dared to say when he could still touch her hand and not see her face. The sound fractured him. Every syllable became a wound reopening. She had recorded it for when he would forget her, though she never said it outright. He sat there, motionless, the light fading until only her voice remained. When the tape clicked to silence, he replayed it, afraid that if he stopped, she would vanish again. The letters were hidden in a box beneath the piano, dozens of them, each sealed but never sent. Her handwriting curved, gently, the ink faded by time and tears. He read every word as if they were confessions written in another language. She had written of fear, of hope, of love that asked for nothing in return. Each line carried her heartbeat, each page her silence. By the time he finished the last one, the ink had blurred in his hands. It wasn't rain this time. It was his own regret, dripping slowly into the spaces where her words had once lived. He walked through the city at midday, yet the light seemed crueler than ever. Every shadow carried the echo of her laughter. Every face reminded him of how easily beauty could lie. He passed the places they once went, the bookstore, the pier, the cafe, now stripped of her voice. The world had become too visible, too exposed. He longed for the days when her words painted meaning over the unseen. Sight, he realized, had only blinded him to what truly mattered. The sun burned overhead, but inside him there was nothing but night. At the back of an old drawer, he found it, a photograph. In it, he sat by the sea, head tilted toward her laughter, unaware of the camera, unaware of how alive he looked when he couldn't see. She was beside him, her hand midair caught in a gesture of joy. He stared at the image for hours, tracing her smile with trembling fingers. It was the first time he truly saw her, not the way sight revealed, but the way love remembered. The photo shook in his hands as the truth settled deep within. He had never been blind until now. He no longer trusted his eyes. The colors he once chased now mocked him, too bright, too hollow, too alive for a heart that had forgotten how to feel. He wandered through rooms filled with light but found only ghosts in the corners, whispering her name in silence. The walls seemed to breathe with her absence. Every reflection was a lie. Every face a reminder that clarity could still deceive. He realized that seeing was not the same as understanding. The light he had begged for had shown him the world, yes, but not how to live it. He searched for her everywhere. On train platforms, in passing crowds, in the faces of women who smiled without knowing why. Every voice that carried laughter turned him around too quickly. Every footstep in rhythm made him believe she might be near. But each time he reached out, the stranger's gaze reminded him that she existed only in memory now. The city pulsed around him, indifferent to his longing. He realized the cruel truth, that love, once lost, hides best in plain sight. The sea called him back like an unfinished sentence. Midnight wrapped the pier in fog, the air heavy with salt and remembrance. He sat where they first met, the wood beneath him damp and cold. The waves whispered against the posts, each crash sounding like her laughter fading into the dark. He closed his eyes, hoping for her voice, but the wind gave him only emptiness. Somewhere between the stars and the tide, he whispered her name, and for a heartbeat, he thought he heard it echo back. He confessed not to another soul, but to the silence. Sitting before the mirror, he spoke the truth he had buried beneath regret. That he had not loved her for her beauty, nor for her kindness, but for the way she had seen him when no one else could. The irony of it twisted deep. When the world had no shape, she was his clarity. When the world bloomed in color, she became invisible. His reflection stared back, tired and hollow. He whispered, "I see you now," though he knew it was too late. It began slowly, the world dimming at the edges, shadows bleeding into shapes again. He thought it was exhaustion at first, but soon the blur returned like an old friend. The doctors said his body was rejecting the light. He didn't fight it. He sat by the window for days, watching the colors fade, the world softening into outlines once more. As sight slipped away, peace settled in, cruel, gentle, inevitable. He realized he wasn't losing something. He was returning home. He hadn't heard her voice in months, but the sound of it returned like sunlight through heavy clouds, soft, uncertain, real. He was sitting on the hospital steps, the world now dim and familiar again. When she spoke his name, he turned, half believing it was only memory playing tricks. Yet there she was, fragile but alive, her voice trembling with everything unsaid. For a long moment neither moved. The years between them hung in the air like unfallen rain. He didn't need to see her clearly to know. The shape of her breath, the cadence of her silence. They were home. And in that moment, sight became meaningless once more. He watched her from the corridor as she spoke with the doctor, her reflection caught between glass and light. She didn't see him, or maybe she pretended not to. He pressed his hand to the window, tracing the outline of her figure, trying to memorize her presence again. The glass felt cold, a barrier between past and redemption. He thought of all the things he could say, but every word seemed too small to hold the weight of loss. Sometimes love survives not through reunion, but through distance, through the unbearable act of letting someone walk away while the heart still kneels to their memory. Their paths crossed again in the courtyard, under trees that had begun to shed their leaves. He heard her footsteps before he felt her presence, soft and hesitant. When he turned, she was standing close, the wind catching the ends of her hair. No words passed between them, none were needed. He reached out, uncertain, and she guided his hand to her face. Tears met fingertips, and he understood everything she could never say. Forgiveness bloomed quietly between them, fragile as breath. He smiled, not with joy, but with surrender. The kind that comes when two souls finally stop pretending they were ever separate. That night, the rain returned. The same rhythm that had once drawn them together beneath a cafe awning. He sat by the window, listening, remembering. Every drop felt like a heartbeat from another time. She was gone again, perhaps for good this time, but her voice lingered in the rain, whispering through memory and glass. He imagined her walking somewhere far away, under the same sky, hearing the same rain. Love, he realized, wasn't something that ended. It simply changed shape. From voice to silence, from light to shadow, from presence to prayer. The darkness had returned, but it no longer frightened him. It was warm now, familiar, forgiving. He sat by the sea one last time, the same place where her voice had first found him. The world around him whispered in colorless peace. He could feel the tide's rhythm beneath his palms, the scent of salt, the hum of gulls circling above. Closing his eyes felt like coming home. Somewhere beyond the sound of the waves, he imagined her laughter carried by wind, gentle and unbroken. Sight had taken her from him, but blindness gave her back, not in body, but in forever. She found the letter days after his final visit, his handwriting delicate, uneven, trembling, as if written between breaths. He had confessed everything, his blindness returning, his regrets, his truth. He wrote of how he saw her more clearly without eyes than he ever could with them. Standing by the shore, she read it aloud to the wind, each word scattering into the waves like petals. The tide reached for her feet, salt and sorrow mingling on her skin. When the sea swallowed the last of his words, she whispered a goodbye that carried both forgiveness and finality. The horizon blurred, and for the first time, she understood. Love was not meant to be kept. It was meant to be set free. She traveled to the edge of the coast where the lighthouse stood, seeking the man who had once cared for him after his operation. The keeper, a quiet soul wrapped in the scent of salt and oil, told her what Elias never had, that he had refused another surgery that could have saved his sight. He had chosen the darkness willingly, saying that light no longer held meaning without her. The words hit her like the tide against rock, relentless and cold. She stood in the lighthouse doorway, staring at the turning beam sweeping across the waves. The world tilted, and for the first time, she saw love not as beauty, but as sacrifice. When the truth settled, it broke her, not in sound, but in silence. She walked down the path from the lighthouse, the wind lashing her face, her tears lost to the salt. She screamed his name once, but the wind devoured it, carrying it out to the endless gray. The ache inside her was not anger. It was something deeper, more haunting, the unbearable weight of being loved beyond reason. She sank to her knees in the tall grass, clutching her chest, her breath uneven. Above her, the clouds moved fast, swallowing the last of the light. In that storm of silence, her heart cracked wide open, not because he was gone, but because he had loved her enough to vanish. That night, unable to bear the weight of memory, she returned to the lighthouse with trembling hands and a heart full of ghosts. Inside, the room smelled of salt, oil, and loss. She lit the lantern he once touched, its flame catching on the brittle air. When the first spark met the old wood, the fire rose hungry and fast, licking the walls with golden rage. She stood outside, watching the tower become a pyre, for love, for regret, for everything that could not be undone. The beam that once guided lost ships now fell into darkness, and for a fleeting moment, she swore she saw his shadow standing beside her, smiling softly, forgiven at last. By morning, only smoke and ruin remained. She walked among the ashes, barefoot, the world gray and hollow around her. The sea was calm now, as if morning had ended. In her hand she held a piece of scorched wood from the lighthouse, a fragment of what once was. She pressed it to her heart, whispering his name one last time. The horizon shimmered faintly, the light thin and fragile, like forgiveness reborn. Love, she thought, was not about keeping what you lose. It was about carrying the echo long after the sound fades. When she turned away, the wind followed her, soft and endless, like his voice saying goodbye. He dreamed of the sea again, but it was not the sea of the living. It was softer, endless, painted in the sound of her laughter carried across invisible tides. There was no horizon, only warmth. And the faint echo of her footsteps on water that didn't sink. He couldn't see her, but he didn't need to. Every sound was her voice, every breath the rhythm of her heart once pressed against his. In this quiet place between worlds, sight was no longer currency. Only memory mattered. And memory at last was kind. He felt her hand before he heard her voice. The warmth spread slowly through his fingers, familiar, unwavering. When he turned toward the sound, she was there, not as he remembered her, but as something light itself could not contain. Her presence hummed with calm, neither ghost nor woman, only truth. She didn't speak, and yet he understood. Love had never left. It had only changed form, waiting for him to close his eyes once more. He took her hand, and together they began to walk. Not forward, not back, but into everything. A melody drifted through the air, the one they had begun long ago but never finished. He remembered each note, each pause where her laughter once fit. Now their voices joined again, hers above his like light above water. The song filled the air, weaving sound and silence until both became one. Every chord was forgiveness, every echo release. As they sang, the world around them began to dissolve. The sea, the sky, even the wind, until nothing remained but harmony. The unfinished became whole, and the silence that followed was not an end, but completion. Time, like the tide, erases even the deepest footprints. The sea rose gently around them, swallowing the sand, the light, the memory of pain. Yet nothing felt like loss anymore. It was a return, a merging. The voices faded into the surf, and the horizon swallowed them whole. The sea took everything. Their words, their names, their sorrow. But beneath its surface, something eternal lingered, a pulse, a whisper, a promise. Love did not drown. It became the ocean. The world faded to quiet. Darkness closed in, not as an ending but as a beginning. The same comforting dark that had once carried her voice to him. He was blind again, but this time he smiled. Somewhere in that endless night she laughed, soft and near. The stars pulsed once, then fell still. And in the silence that followed, there was peace, the kind that doesn't come from seeing, but from knowing. Love had found its final shape, unseen, unbroken, infinite.